Hello and welcome to this presentation of the App Builder, the future no-code low-code studio of Mega. What we want to present you here is the philosophy of the App Builder. It is what is usually called a WYSIWYG web builder, which means what you see is what you get. So you can basically do everything through drag and drops. It is a builder that provides the ability to generate web application without coding expertise. So no technical or complex settings that a normal user would actually understand. It also provides the ability to go toward advanced expertise, should you be a developer and want to do some complex behavior. And also it applies a specific principle in terms of the way it works, which means that we decouple the builder, the studio that built the application, and the run of the built application. These are the principles of what we are working on and how we are building this app builder. As a reminder, this app builder is going to be working with the new architecture of HAS, which means that is going to be part of the application server contained in the current version of what we have. As a reminder, we have this different stack with the web, with the module, the front-end module, and the back-end module that access the database. If we zoom in into the section of what is inside the applications server and the module that we have today, we already have a set of technical modules. We have a set of functional modules here that we see in the screen, like the OPEX web frontend that we know of today, the REST API that we have, the OPEX backends, and so on, as well as some mobile type of application like Audit Everywhere and Application ID card. So the app builder, the studio, will be one module among others that will have the particularity to be able to build the other web part of the application. It will have its own life cycles, and the apps that are generated will have their own life cycles. For example, the studio will be able to generate the future Audit Everywhere app or the future Application ID card app. They will be fully autonomous application with a login page, a logout, some menus, some screens. The studio will also be able to generate piece of application that can be a piece of pages that can be embedded in other websites. For example, they could be embedded in the existing OPEX web frontends, or they could be embedded on any other system, thinking about integration with other applications. So if we zoom in into the Studio App Builder, well, you need to understand of what is currently a web application. A web application is composed of three major stacks. The front end, that usually user sees and access to. A backend, that is what the front end used to get some data. And the database that stores the data. In the backend, you have usually the business logics, the filtering, the data access. In the front end, you usually have the UI UX logic and access to some data. What we have decided for this app builder is that the access to the data will be done through REST API. We have done that because we want this new app builder to be able to build applications that contain data coming from OPEX from one end, but also data coming from other systems such as ServiceNow or Jira with live data. What is interesting in that case is that you could build a screen that contains data from OPEX and data from ServiceNow without to have to create in OPEX some meta model and import data and managing the synchronization of the data. So the top part here of the front end is the scope of the app builder. It's basically a studio that will allow you to build a UX, UI, logic, and access some data. And in this presentation, we'll show an example of data coming from OPEX, and we'll show an example of data coming from another system. In the introduction, we mentioned that the builder would have a different logic in terms of decoupling the builder and the run itself. So let's look at the architecture of HAS today. We have the front end and the back end. So the backend is the Apex backend we know as of today. We have some REST API that can allow you to access the data to the backend. We are going to create a module, the Studio App Builder, that will be used to build the application. This studio will be used in development environments, not directly in production, but in development environment where the user will actually define what they want to have in the screen and the logic they want to have. When they'll be happy with what they have, they'll generate the actual app they want to have in production. And users will actually connect to the application in production. Now that you have understood the high-level principle, we are going to have an overview, a demo of some parts of what we are testing today. Of course, these presentations show a prototype to validate the hypothesis of work we have mentioned. During this phase, we may adjust the hypothesis of work we've just done. We may add some complementary feature or remove some element of the scope. We are now going to access the App Builder or the Studio. So the Studio will be accessed through the HAS portal that we see here. I'm going to put myself on full screen, and you'll need to connect with your credentials to access the Studio. So when you will connect to the Studio will be composed of the different apps. So remember in the hypothesis we've made, we can have several autonomous apps like Audit Everywhere application ID cards, or we can have piece of the screen that could be embedded in other applications in the existing OPEX or other system. So I'm going to create a new application from scratch in this presentation. So I'm going to create a new application. Let's say it's going to be an ITPM app ID card application, and I'm going to be accessing this application. When I create an application, if I decide that is going to be a piece of a UX that is going to be reused, I probably will use a template with an empty layout. If I decide that is going to be a self-autonomous application, I may want to have a top bar with some menus, some login, logout. In the future, there might be several templates that might be here to ease and speed up the creation of a new app. So let's go for doing a self-autonomous application. So when I enter this studio, I will have all the elements I need to build my application. So on the left side, I have the control that I can put on my applications, meaning forms, fields like text or list of objects or diagrams or layouts. This example here is obviously not finished today in this presentation, but it's give you some ideas of what can be placed. You can define several pages in your application. So here you have the simple layout template we've choose. One page. We could decide to add another page. So let's add another page to my application, just for you to see that we can have several pages. So pages may be useful when you have a wizard and you want to navigate when you click next and go to another page. You have the data access that you can have. So here in that example, we have already two data sources of the data, some random data that's coming from an external website, and some data coming from ITPM. Currently, we have only created a data source based on GraphQL. Tomorrow, we could have data source connecting to ServiceNow or GRR or whatever other system to combine data from different systems. And other areas such as variables to have local variables and style, where you can define your style sheets if you want to change the color of the button and so on. So let's go into our page and start to do something here. So I want here on my page to have a first text and says, welcome to ITPM App ID card. And you'll define this text and eventually the style sheets that you want to have. Like let's say you want to have it in heading number 1, and it's going to be your headers that you want to have. As you can see on the right side, you have complementary items that you can complete the component that you've just selected. to manage the layout, the spacing, to manage the visibility, to manage some properties, and obviously the content of the object. What we want to do here is we want to have the list of all the applications in this ITPM app ID card. So we're going to drag and drop a list component to put some elements. So this component needs to have data. So I need to feed this data. So I'm going to select this component and I'm going to select the data to define what is the data source for this component. Remember, we had our data source ITPM already available. So I'm going to select this as a data source. As you can see, you have another data source here, which is a component data source, which means that the data can come from another component already in this page. Let's say, and we will see that in the later stage, you click on an item, and you want another item to refresh. So I'm going to here select ITPM for this list, and it's going to be part of my data source. Once I've decided my data source, I need to define here, because this is a list component, the field that I want to have. So I'm going to select here that I want to have in my data source the name of the application. I want to put the application code, and I want to put the comment of the application. That shows the data that is coming from this data source. We are currently in a development environment, so we see dev data sample. And when this application will be published in production, obviously the component will refresh with the production data. We can define a different set of options on this component. The number of pages the component has, or the number of items the component has on the list. If we allow filtering, if we allow grouping. So if we allow filtering, it will enable in the component the filtering capability. We may want that when we click on an item of the list that we navigate to another page. So that's going to be the workflow. Or we may want that when we click on this element, we refresh some other part of the screen. So for this example, let's say we're going to say that when we click, we're going to show the diagram and potentially show the properties of the object. So for that, I'm going to split my screen in two, and I'm going to take a container layers that's going to split my screen in two. On the left side, I will take a diagram, and I will put a diagram on the left side. And on the right side, I will put a form that will contain some set of the object. Look, let's say I want to expose the name of the application. So I just drag and drop an area where I can put the name, and I will put the name, and I'm just naming it. So whenever I will click, for example, on account management, it will show the diagram that is related to account management, and show the name of account management here in an editable form, so that I can change the name and save. That's obviously an example. You could also edit directly in the list. It really depends on the use case. You can have other type of field, date, time, and so on, and so on. It really depends on what you want to achieve. In that example, we have just a classical, just a technical item called counter. It's just for the development phase to test our programming. So here we have a counter, and we have some properties. We can define, as I was mentioning, the workflow. So whenever we'll click on something, let's say when we'll click on the list or on the counter. So when we'll be on the list, we click on the list. We want to navigate, for example, on another page. We click on workflow. We click on item selected. So whenever we'll select on items, and then we'll define the workflow. The workflow can be navigate to another page, and then we can define the page we want to navigate to. So whenever we will click, then we'll navigate to the next page. Each component has its own set of items that we can, or set of actions we can do when we click on the element. We could apply some style to change the color and so on. For this presentation, we will stop here, and now we want to see the results. So to see the results, we'll click the view, which is going to be a preview of the result. And we're going to be able to preview this result as an application. which open a new tab as an end user would see the application. And we see our top bar with the menus and login, the welcome ITPM, the list of objects, and our counter. In the previous part of the presentation, we have seen how to create a fully autonomous application with a header and all the page. In that example now, we're going to see how to embed only a piece of the application to another application. So first, let's build this application. So I'm going to create my new application to be embedded. And I will take a layout that contains no headers with no menus and no login page. In that example, I will only take the grids because I just want to have a list of applications that I want to embed in an existing other application. And I will take my data source, the application, and I will define here the field that I want to see. So once again, as we did in the previous example, the name, the application code, and let's go in this time take the version number, for example. Now my application is saved. I can test it, see if it works. And I have my application. What I will need to do now is to take this URL and paste it in the application for which I want to embed it. So in that example, I will go in my preferred tool to customize it to add this piece of component that I want to embed. So in that example, we are going to embed in ITPM the piece of the list we have just created. So I'm just adding here a new menu called app that will contain my app. So in that example, my app is embedded here through a component for which I will give the URL of the piece of the application. So I will give the URL of the page I've just built through the builder. Remember, in the logic of the application, we will build the app. So here we're putting the app builder because we're in development phase. When we'll be in production, there will be the name of the module that has been generated. My configuration is done. So now I can go and access the result. So I will connect to the web front end with my favorite user, and I will connect to the application. We will see the new menu that was created in that example here, the app menu. Before clicking on it, I will just show you that if we add information in OPEX, in that example, so let's add application. When I will access it through my embedded component, it will obviously take this newly updated information. Remember, this is a prototype. For now, the edit of the list is not enabled, so we cannot directly create or edit. But we see our newly created application through this list. Let's now wrap up our presentation. We have seen during this presentation an application built with the app builder with a fully autonomous approach with menus and login and logout capabilities. We have seen the application builder used in a context where the build page will be embedded in another application, in this example OPEX, but could be any system of the customer. We are now working on obviously other areas of the prototype, the publish mechanism that I didn't present in this presentation, the customization mechanism, how the user will actually customize a standard delivered application that Mega provides. And for those of you that are interested, the technological stack of this builder is in .NET 7 using Blazor and based on REST API of GraphQL. There are many more steps to come, obviously, that we have already identified, which is obviously making sure that the builder will enable us to have a safe customization approach with an easy migration approach with no regressions when we migrate. In this example, we saw that it was very basic style sheets, so we need to work on the style sheets so that the design of the components are nice looking. We need to continue and invest on the action click and workflow so that whenever we click on something, it does some actions. The handling of the responsiveness of the generated application, and of course, working on the controls to have lists, trees, input box, diagrams, and so on, to be able to build a fully complete application. And of course, more are to come. The more we'll dive in, the more ideas we'll have and we'll discover. Thank you for watching this presentation. I hope you enjoyed the future of the app builder, and don't hesitate to give us some feedback. Thank you.